Hi, welcome to Infinite Resilience Stories, where we're redefining what it means to be human, one story at a time. My name is Luis Feliz, and I'm your host, and also the guy behind the camera asking all these questions. In this interview, you will have the opportunity to hear the unique life experience of Hugueth Contreras. We believe her life is a miracle, just like yours. And as we listen to these stories, our ability to love and honor each other will eventually evolve and perhaps make the world a better place. So if you like this interview, please give it a thumbs up. If you like the channel, please subscribe. And if you have connected with her story, please leave a comment down below. We would love to hear from you. So, without further ado, please enjoy the interview.
Some stories I've heard is that I'm a premature baby and I was born close to 8 months.
Thank you for coming.
Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. All right, so let's begin with what is your name?
My name is Hugueth Contreras and I go by Hughie for nickname.
Okay, nickname. Okay, awesome.
Yes.
Now, where were you born?
I was born in Managua, Nicaragua in a city called San Judas.
Okay. Any stories that you've heard about your birth?
So some stories I've heard is that I'm a premature baby and I was born close to 8 months in term. And my mother had, her water break and she was en route to the hospital in a pickup truck. And we lived in a small, it didn't have actual roads paved. So she tried to make it to the hospital and she delivered me en route. And by the time she got to the emergency room, I was already exposed. And so, I barely made it to the hospital. I was basically born in a truck.
Okay, awesome.
That's what I recall.
Okay, and when's your birthday?
I was born February 5th, 1985.
Okay, and what is your father's name?
Great question. I know it starts with an E, and I want to say that his name is Eduardo, and I don't know his last name.
Okay. What do you know about your father?
So I know that my father was not aware of my existence until I was in '99. So I was about 14 years old, and he found out of my existence the night prior to him meeting me. I was visiting home for the first time at 14, and it was the summer of '99, and I had always been in question as to who my father was. It was very sacred story for my mother to not share. And so I guess she was listening all those years as to how important it was for me to have that image of my father. And so she deliberately took me to him without notice. And so she called him the night before. She had made up this whole time that she didn't know where he was, and I think it was like kind of a safety net for her to not really be in question, because I found out when I met him that she was basically the mistress. He was married and he had a family, and when she found out she was pregnant, she basically took off, and she was never to be found by him. So he received a phone call the night prior saying he had a 14-year-old daughter and that she was going to take him to him at the mechanic shop the following day. So
how was that experience of meeting your dad?
It was shocking and relief to kind of have a picture to who my father was. And I had questions, that I didn't look like my mother and I didn't look like my sister. And so I was always in question, like, who am I and where do I come from? I don't associate myself with any of my family members. And so when I saw him and I knew of him, and I have an older sister, and I always thought her to be my blood sister. And when I met him, he told me that he met my mother and my sister already existed. So I had the shock of having my father presented to me without notice, and then hear this man, a stranger, my biological father, to tell me that my sister's only a half sister. So it was like a double shock, at a 14 years old where you're still trying to figure yourself out. And it was an experience that I will not forget, but I'm thankful for, because it really made me understand my mother and her journey, and more so now as an adult, I get to appreciate, who she's been and take her for her raw self.
Okay. Speaking of your mother, what's your mother's name?
Angela Contreras.
Okay, and where was she born?
She was also born in Managua, Nicaragua.
Okay, and what is her occupation?
Right now, she is a patient care associate, which is a combination of phlebotomy, CNA, which is a certified nurse assistant, and patient care, kind of like caregiver. So she does EKG also.
What do you remember of your mother doing for a living as you were growing up?
So growing up, I came to America in '89. I was 4 years old. So it was, she had a work visa, and she only knew how to work in labor. So she worked a lot of factory jobs with chemicals, and it was mass production. And she did that for a couple years. And then she went into another factory. I don't recall exactly what it was, but she worked factories for a good, I would say 15 years. And then she got a job at the Postal Service, and she did that for about a year or so. And then she started working at the hospital where she still currently is now. It's been about 12 years that she's been there. She started off as in housekeeping, and then gradually she started becoming comfortable with speaking English in front of me and my sister, and she decided to get somewhat of an education, and she got certifications in certified nursing assistant, and she did that for about 5-7 years. And then she went on to study EKG and phlebotomy, and combined that, it created the position where she's at now.
So she began as a housekeeper?
As a housekeeper at the hospital.
And now she is?
And now she's she does all three. They basically have her fill in whichever is needed. But for the most part, she sits in front of a monitor and reads heart rates.
Wow.
She's a monitor tech.
Yeah, amazing.
Yes.
Now, you mentioned that you came to America, United States, at the age of 4.
Yes.
What do you remember about that?
The journey? So what I remember about the journey is that it was a 6-month-long journey. It started in the summer of July, which in Nicaragua it's reversed because it falls below the equator. So it was winter there, but summer here. So we left in July, and we made it in the U.S. in December of '89. And during the journey, it was pretty intense in the sense that it required a lot of courage on my mother's behalf, traveling with 2 girls. The intention behind her coming to the States is that she was diagnosed with cervical cancer, and she had already been through chemo in Nicaragua, and at that point they had recommended for her to get a full hysterectomy. And my grandmother had already been living here in the States for about a year or 2. And she started getting into the religion of Jehovah's Witness, and the religion does not believe in transfusion. And that was one of the big risks that she was running into. And so they decided that she would come and have the surgery here in America because they would present other options of not getting transfused. And so that was appealing to the family, to her, knowing that she had 2 daughters, and she, wanted to get the best outcome for everyone. And so my grandmother had hired coyotes. And so the journey was 6 months long. And when 1 month into it, we got into Mexico. She had bought a visa passport to make it to Mexico. And then I want to say we were at the airport somewhere where it had an escalator. And my sister was very afraid of escalators, and it was uncommon. It's not the norm what you would see in Nicaragua, third world country. And so when she saw that, she screamed, and it attracted attention from the police officers, and they questioned her who she was, and they basically deported us to Guatemala. So we were in Guatemala for about 4 months, and she learned, to have different occupations. She would wash clothes, more, like house duties, and she made a living out of that in the meantime, not expecting that the journey would lead up to that. And so we stayed there for 4 months, and then in December, we made it to Mexico for the second time. I know that there was some kind of blizzard or hailstorm in Mexico that year, and I apparently, I didn't have much clothes, and I was only 4, and I've always been a small person, and so I was screaming of cold, and this church took us in, and that was our home for a couple days. And I don't know what happened from there on to how we crossed the border in Brownsville in Texas. But there is a story that also one of the coyotes got shot while we were crossing the canal. And it seems to be robbers. I thought it was the Border Patrol, but it was more of, I guess it's a common thing that they have people they know that they're getting paid lots of money to cross these people over. And so one of the person were shot, and we all ran, and nobody knows what happened. We don't think he died, but I don't know.
Yeah. And then, do you remember getting to the United States?
Yes, I remember being received by my grandmother, and she had 2 teddy bears, one for my sister and one for myself, sorry. And mine was a parrot, and my sister was a dinosaur. Mine was a black parrot, and my sister was a yellow-orange dinosaur.
Have you ever wondered what was the church that took you in for those few months in Mexico?
Have I ever wondered what?
The church. You said a church took you in Mexico. Have you ever considered,
why
these people took you in?
So the church that took me in, I don't know why they took me in, but I'm sure it was part of my journey. Perhaps it was to avoid us getting deported again, or give maybe my mother hope that, that there are people that would be there to support her, because she was, I would say 23, 24. She was a very young, single mother that had the idea of perhaps not maybe living, she was here in search of her health. So I haven't questioned it, but I know that it's meant to be the way it happened. And so I'm appreciative of it.
Yeah. You mentioned siblings. How many siblings do you have?
Siblings. I have my sister, which I still consider my blood sister, but biologically she would be my half sister. So I have one. And then when I met my father that one time, I did get to meet his wife that was the wife back then. And I want to say I have probably about 8 siblings. He introduced me to all of them. And in fact, I do have one brother that we're about a month apart. My birthday's in February and his is in January, same year. So,
And what's your sister's name?
My sister's name is Gretel.
Okay. Where did you grow up?
I grew up in Hialeah, Florida. I was there from 89 up until 2012. I moved in different areas of Hialeah, but for the most part, I was raised there.
Okay. Describe the house you lived in.
The house that I lived in? So the first house that I lived in was an apartment building on the 2nd floor, and we shared space with my uncle, my 2 male cousins, my grandmother, my mother, and then my sister and myself.
Okay. What games did you play as a kid?
So the games we played as a kid, we played a lot of Nintendo, Mario Brothers. Then it became Genesis. I used to love playing Aladdin, Sonic and Hedgehog, and Street Fighter. We had a vinyl player, and I would love to scratch it. And a lot of, outdoor games, hide and seek. My sister used to love scaring me as a little girl because I have a intense startle reflex till this day. You scare me and I'm like, ah! So, just innocent games, a lot of storytelling, and a lot of making up, being creative. We didn't have much to grow up with, so we always were creative in that sense. And yeah.
Okay. If you had to describe your childhood with one word, what would it be? And why?
My childhood in one word, and why? I would have to say confused. And the reason for that is I really battled finding some similarity or commonality with my immediate family. With the religion, I struggled with the religion from very early on. My identification and who I was in the family, because I had made up that I don't look like them. And I didn't feel like I molded into the patterns or behaviors that they wanted of me, the expectation. And, you know, confused even in school, not being able to salute the flag, not be able to participate in birthdays or any paganistic holiday. So any Christmas, Thanksgiving. So I felt secluded and not accepted. And because I wasn't in agreement with what I was believed in or taught, it was always that battle. Because at least if I felt that if I believed in the faith of the religion, then it would kind of solidify me more as a person and identify myself and be able to withstand whatever resistance I'd have in the world, but I never felt grounded in it. And so it kind of molded my experience growing up. And into high school even, I wanted to participate in sports, and the combination of not being able to afford it or even be part of it because it would take away time from the church and Bible studies, it kind of took away my identity and who I wanted to be. And so I felt like I always had to, you know, look a certain way, behave a certain way, even though behind closed doors, I would always battle with my mom and say, I don't want to do this. And, you know, to appease her because I wanted to be a good child, because I knew that she had sacrificed so much, then it became more of a, I have to be a good daughter. And so, yeah.
So you mentioned that given the religion and your family, that it didn't allow you to be who you wanted to be. Who was that?
So
who did you want to be?
So I felt, you know, I think that who I wanted to be basically depended on the stage I was at in my life. I guess the first notion I have of not wanting to be this person that I was portraying was maybe as young as being in first or second grade, you know, not being able to speak the language of English and being in ESOL classes and, you know, kind of seeing the struggles my mom was having. I wanted her to be part of the field trips, and I was kind of against the idea of like, why do I have to be, I know my father, why does my mother have to work so much? Why do I have to do my homeworks alone? And why do I not get to see my mother as much as I want to? And so it was always in that question, and I kind of felt like I battled it as early as that age, being in kinder, first, second, and then going into middle school, again, because of the area I lived in, it, you know, the district I belonged to was, you know, not the, you know, I guess it's not even an ideal, but it kind of brought me into a space where I was seeing kids getting pregnant or maybe doing drugs, and it wasn't someone I identified myself as. And so it was like, do I want to be cool? Do I want to still be me? Who am I? And so when I got into high school, I really wanted to be in sports. That was my thing. I don't know if it was my way of expressing myself and kind of being me and just having a passion towards something. And again, that was taken away from me because of my situation. And so, yeah, it kind of depended on the stage of my life that I was going through.
What sport did you want to play?
So I got a taste of it when I was in 6th grade. I played volleyball, and I did that through the YMCA for that season. And then when I got in high school, I trained for the swimming team, and I only did that for about a month. And I remember my first meet that I was going to compete, they pulled me to do a random blood pressure check, and I guess the excitement and all that, my blood pressure was skyrocket, and I didn't pass it. And so they let me rest for 10 minutes, and they rechecked it, and again, I failed it. And so at that point, they had me get cleared by a doctor, and we didn't have insurance, and that was basically the end of any idea of sports. I tried to, I would have loved to have played soccer, been part of track, and just kind of once you're in sports, you find your way of what you're good at. Mm-hmm. So tennis.
Okay. Do you play any of those sports now?
I played volleyball probably up through occasionally in my early 20s, and then I've basically given it up. No, I have not.
Okay. Stop. What sort of things did your family celebrate?
So the things that my family celebrate, it is basically graduations, anniversaries, and I believe that's it. So no New Year's, no Christmas, no Thanksgiving, Mother's Day, none of that. Yeah. Memorial Day, none of it.
How did that make you feel growing up?
Growing up, it made me feel secluded because I didn't have the faith that they had or the understanding. No matter how deep into the Bible I would read, I never was in accordance with it. And so it was that internal battle of why am I doing something I don't want to do or believe in? So it was a lot of seclusion, resistance, but at the end I did it to appease my mother. Yeah. And my family. So
describe a typical celebration, graduations or any of those things.
So a typical graduation within my family would look like having my family over. Sometimes it may be a surprise graduation or a surprise anniversary party. And we just basically, it's been more in the setting of a home environment or perhaps a clubhouse. And we have close friends and family, potluck style, and also weddings. We would do weddings.
Okay. Mm-hmm. What were your family's attitude towards alcohol and smoking?
So my family's attitude towards alcohol and smoking with the background of Jehovah's Witness is not accepted. Alcohol with as long as you drink in moderation is accepted, and definitely no smoking. None.
So you never experienced any of that at home growing up?
At home, never.
Okay. What was the discipline like at home?
So the discipline at home was what traditional Latinos maybe. In my home, the tradition was a spank with the hand, with the shoe, whatever was accessible. And it came with shaming sometimes, pull of the ear, and maybe a scream.
Who was a disciplined person at home?
The person to give discipline would be my mother. Yeah. Yes.
What was your mother strict about?
My mother was strict about behavior. If we went to someone's home, we had to sit, not touch anything, not ask for things. If people did offer, you don't accept. And so it was very much so in that, you're basically robotic almost, and you're not there to bother people.
How did that influence you growing up?
The way that influenced me was I had a certain way of thinking of how things should look like an expectation of what good means. And so I feel like a lot of it came somewhat with judgment too. And so it distorted my way of being, especially in my early 20s or my late teens when I decided to give up the religion. It definitely had an impact.
Where did you go to school?
So I went to school, my elementary school was in Hialeah called M.A. Milam Elementary. I went to Jose Marti Middle School in Hialeah Gardens. And then in high school, I went to Barbara Goldman in Miami Lakes.
Okay. And afterwards?
I went to college to FIU for 7 years. I did my undergrad and graduate school there.
In what?
My undergrad is in health sciences and a minor in health service administration. And then grad school, I got my doctorate in physical therapy.
Okay. Mm-hmm. Awesome. What was your first paying job?
Oh, my first paying job was at the age of 15, and it was under the table. I was a server at a small Thai place in Miami Springs. I was there for a summer. And I worked, I would say, maybe during the weekends, maybe 2 nights a week.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Okay, so what was your favorite job?
My favorite job is when I was in undergrad, I worked at Shula's Hotel in Miami Lakes, and I loved it. I got to experience the hospitality industry, and I was so obsessed with getting the job there. And I remember when I went through the application phase, I would call HR and tell them, where am I in the process? And I was very persistent. I really wanted the job, and I landed the job. And at first, I started off working the front desk at the hotel. And then I got trained in working reservations for the hotel, and then eventually into the spa. And then I got cross-trained in the golf club also. So it was nice. It was the first time I got exposed to multitasking, and I was a fast learner, and I just loved the thrill of having something new. And it paid well at the time, and it got me through college. So
what was your first job, your worst job?
My worst job,
or least
favorite job would have to be when I worked at Johnny Rockets. And I didn't last there very long. And I only say it's my least favorite because I had an experience serving. I was brand new. I think it may have been my first day that they let me be alone. And I remember doing one of those malt shakes, and the machine, I guess I didn't know how to work it, and my apron got so messy, and it was the start of my shift. And then they had placed an order for, I guess, chicken tenders or something, and it came back not well done. And so the person screamed at me, and I remember feeling so overwhelmed and like I did something wrong, and I didn't feel good enough. And so, yeah, I only made it my least favorite because of the experience I had. The employer itself, they were great. They put you through good training, and they are very supportive. So I would say it was that, just because of my experience.
And so what do you do now?
So right now, as a physical therapist, I basically am what they call per diem, which I get to work my schedule around, the days that I'm available. And I work at the hospital. I also work at a nursing home, and I also do at a rehab center.
How come your current job is not your favorite?
It's not my favorite because, I'm in transition. And I've learned I love healthcare and I love helping people. And I've also found a passion in finance and business and investing and compounding money. And so I explored administration at some point and management, and it was exciting, but I felt like there was still something missing. And I still love to help people, but I felt like I was doing it maybe, one person at a time. And I just want to be more impactful and, more in the education. I have other passions right now that I'm still in that phase of exploring. So.
What are those passions?
So the finance and business is one of them. But I also love the idea of personal development. I think that it's something that's not seen as an important tool in our educational system, whether it's in high school or college. And so I feel like everybody is in that exploration, like what are we here for, you know? And it's good to be in that question, but what are we doing about it, you know? And so I think there's so much value in that journey that I want to know. I want to be the light to that.
What do you like to do on your spare time?
In my spare time, so it's a funny question because I feel like I always evolve. And so currently in my spare time, I'm finding a lot of joy in meditation. Audiobooks, and always being in the question as to who am I, what am I here for, what's my purpose, and being in connection with my inner self.
So what have you found in being in the question?
I have found a lot of things, and a lot of it was being that interruption of what I thought I was and my upbringing. So there was no distinction between you and your soul growing up, at least in the religion that I knew of for 18 years. That was, not a separate entity. It was you and your spirit were one. And so now, I've explored that there is, kind of a different identity. I feel like it's more of a spirit, and the human body is just like the mechanism of what we're here for. And it's just kind of fine-tuning yourself into that and really figuring out, like, why am I here? What is my purpose? And I really feel that there is something bigger than I can even feel or explain. I just know it in my deep state, and it's in that questioning that you can get those results, like what your truth is. So, and it's fascinating. It's so beautiful once you begin to explore that. And I feel like everybody has a gift, and it's the beauty in what you're contributing to society.
Yeah. So what is your purpose?
My purpose is to bring, first of all, to be authentic to myself, know my truths, and live by my principles, which are based on the idea of being humble, always being grateful for everything, including the lessons, and being accepted, being in acceptance also of what's been your past. A lot of times I felt that I was stuck on the idea like, why was I born, without a father figure, and why didn't I have things that other people have? And so kind of just coming to terms that it's what was and what is, and I can't do anything about it other than accept it and, choose to be, make the best of it, basically. And so my purpose is to bring that forth into other people, like, bring in that question, like, why, what are you here for? And find a purpose and like your truth.
So you mentioned something about why didn't you have a father figure growing up?
Mm-hmm.
And how did that impact you growing up?
So not having a father figure impacted my growing up I actually denied it for a long time. I felt like, I didn't care. It was more of a curiosity for me to figure out who I looked like. But I was a little numb to the idea of not having a father figure for a long time. But now into my adulthood, I've realized it's impacted me in the way I show up in romantic relationships, and not knowing where I draw the line, because I felt like I never had a male figure tell me, like, no, that is not acceptable. So being able to have healthy boundaries and, having a man figure like show me what it is to be around a gentleman, and so that kind of molded me, maybe have more of a resilience when it comes, or tolerance to men and my expectations of what a man figure should be. So I only learned the masculinity part of my mother, and she was very stoic and non-emotional, and so I've picked up some of those habits, but I've learned that that's not me. I'm more of an empath. I'm heart-driven, and so I've learned to kind of shed that identity because it hasn't served me till now.
Yeah. Growing up, or even to this day, do you like to stick to groups of people or one-on-one interactions with friends?
So now I prefer, actually, I would say that I enjoy both. I feel that there are some times where that one-to-one interaction are so critical for my growth, their growth, and having that intimacy with the person. And intimacy can be, I've learned, not just sexual. It can be just a dialogue between, two different beings. And so I find a lot of value in that, but I also find so much value in connecting with a lot of group of people. And, it's so beautiful to see how we're all just connected.
Yeah. Okay. Do you have a partner?
I currently do not have a partner, no.
Okay. So how would you describe your love life?
So the way I would describe my love life is so different than what it used to be. I've been in this journey, I'd say, for about a year now. And I've found that a lot of it was how I viewed relationships and how I felt I should behave, and always coming from that passive nature growing up, where I need to be a good daughter, or same thing, I need to be a good girlfriend, and being or going against my boyfriend may not be the best thing because it may cause conflict, and I don't want conflict. And so I used that as a way to quiet my voice. And so now I haven't been in a relationship as the newer version of me. And so I feel that it would be a great relationship now because I have found my voice, and I have found that, I bring a lot of value, and because I'm coming from a place of love and humility, then it is okay for me to voice my desires.
So now that you found your voice, can you go back and say what you wanted to say in previous relationship that you chose not to say?
So now that I found my voice, I feel that I can absolutely speak to even my past relationships and tell them how I felt and why, and what assessments I made up of them and how that made me feel. And I've realized now in this journey that it was not about them. It was always about me and my perceptions of them and my reality, which is really maybe not the reality. And so learning that now, I feel like I can step back and, be able to say, like, my interpretation of what's going on here is this, and it's making me feel this way, and, kind of see where that would take us, where I don't want to say compromise, but it's more of a level of understanding where they get my come from and I get theirs, and we get to still be committed to each other despite our maybe differences in what we may believe in.
So, just for clarity,
yes.
What were some of your perceptions of men or relationships and some of the feelings you experienced during these relationships?
So, my experience back then of what a relationship should look like was the woman basically staying quiet, not to have conflict, and then also doing a lot of work and picking up the slack. And because I always saw my mother working a lot and coming home and still cooking and doing all these other things, like it's what I also do in my relationships. And because men have been absent for my entire life, I feel like I've also carried on some of the weight just by nature, not because they've asked me to, I just voluntarily, because it's what I've learned to do. It was a coping mechanism, I guess, and I've learned that it's okay to ask for support, and it's okay to say no, and that it is okay to voice myself. I'm feeling tired. Can you cook? Or, whatever I may be feeling at the time.
Have you ever told yourself there's something wrong here? There's something wrong here.
So have I ever told myself if there's something wrong here? Absolutely. And I know that from a very young age. I kid you not, I was always in question, like with everything. I mean, even with religion, I would see my sister and she happily would get dressed, and I was always in resistance, like, no, I don't want to go to church, and I would cry. And I was always a good child, academically. I was great. I never, I would go to homes, and I was well behaved. But when it came to religion, I was very much always in resistance. And I remember being as young as maybe 12, 13, telling my mother, like, when I turn 15, I'm going to stop going to church because I don't believe in it. And so, yeah, that was always a thing for me. And including the sports was a huge conflict for me, because I wanted to do things and it was just kind of like shot down, the idea of it. And so, yeah, I've made that up for years.
Yeah. Have you ever told yourself, I am on my own? Not as in being independent, like, yeah, I got an apartment on my own. As in, I'm on my own, nobody to help me at any point in your life.
I have felt that way. I have felt that I am on my own multiple times, including late teenager years when I decided not to partake in the religion. I was basically isolated from the family for a long time, and they didn't understand why I was doing this. And in the religion, it is very common for you to get baptized, usually between the age of 10 to 12, maybe 13. By the age of 14, 15, it's almost shocking to not have been baptized by then. It's like something's wrong with you. And so I was 16, 17, 18, I never got baptized. And then at 18, I left the religion. And that was the first time I actually felt alone. And I was the first one to go to college and complete it. And a lot of times it was kind of more of a mock. Like, why is she going to school? She can be going to church and dedicating herself to God. And she's picking a career that, I was battling between going, I knew I liked healthcare, but I didn't know I thought of pursuing psychology, pharmacy. And when it was psychology, I was like, you don't mess with the human brain, or the mental aspect of humans, that's up to God. And so it was always that resistance I felt internally. And I just kind of would do my own thing, but I would never be that courageous person where I was like, I don't care what you guys have to say, this is my life. But I felt it. I felt like I was alone. And then even more so now, I'm 34 years old and I'm going through my journey, my spiritual journey. And it's something that I cannot have a conversation with my family because they're all into the religion. And if I were to tell them, what are you talking about, a spirit? Like, did you remember what the Bible says? And so and I don't do it because I'm afraid to come out or be authentic. It's just sometimes not worth it because I would see the pain in my mother, and I know that it would be kind of like she would feel like a failure. And till this day, she still tries to draw me back into the religion, and she hopes that I will still come back and that I will marry someone of the religion. And I see it in her. And even though she's very respectful of me, I know that it crushes her to see that I'm not going to be saved, and because they have a different belief system. And I get it. I really get it. And so that's where I'm at now. So I do still feel alone sometimes in my family, with mostly. Out in the community and my friends, I show up as who I am. And she knows that I'm doing a lot of personal growth. And she just doesn't know the details.
So the times that you felt that you're on your own, what are you seeking? What would you want?
So the times that I feel alone, I'm seeking my truth. I have these principles that are very strong in me, that have always been there, but I'm seeking my truth, and I'm trying to connect the dots as to what my purpose is going to transpire as a human. So I'm in that exploration phase.
Okay. So for somebody that feels like they're on their own, what kind of person wouldn't feel that way?
So for someone to...
When somebody feels, oh, I feel like I am on my own.
Okay.
Now the question is, what kind of person will never feel that way?
So the kind of person that will feel like they're never alone would be someone that feels whole. They feel complete, maybe confident in what their purpose is. And so, yeah, I would feel that. That would be the case.
Have you ever felt or told yourself, I do not belong?
So I have told myself that I don't belong in the past. Not so much in the arena of... It was more along the lines of not being accepted in my direct family and belief system. And then later on, I've learned that we're all here on this journey, and some of us explore it at a very young age, some mid-age, some, late in their adulthood or senior years. So, I think it's a transformation that we all get to choose, and I'm excited to be part of it now.
All right. We're almost wrapping up.
Okay.
All right. So, who are you becoming?
So I am becoming, I want to say, like a leader role. I feel that I have this peace to me. Like I'm always, not zenful, but I feel like I bring a lot of calmness into my area and a lot of acceptance and connection, and I want to unify everyone. I feel that we're all here to be connected, loving, happy, accepting, and in discovery constantly. I feel that it's part of to evolve as human beings.
Okay. So you're 34 right now?
I'm 34 years old.
What would you tell Hugueth at 13?
So what I would tell young Hugueth at the age of 13 would be that everything was in perfect synchrony. That the universe put me into a single parent home. It showed me a lot of resilience, and to stay the way that you are and be able to show passion and stay committed to finding your truth, and always be in that question, and don't ever lose that, and still keep your childlike ways and innocence and peaceful state of being, no matter what altercation or what roadblocks you may encounter, because the universe will always have your back, and it will evolve into something bigger than you know or could understand right now.
Okay. So, last two questions.
All right.
Yeah.
Go for it.
This one is, if your life up until today is your resume,
Okay.
what are you applying for?
It's a good one. It's deep. So if my life up until now is a resume, what am I applying for?
Or what could you apply for?
What could I apply for? It would definitely, I would say, be applying for something grand, more worldwide, impactful, legendary, whether it looks like a motivational or inspirational speaker, doing retreats, doing something where humans really get how powerful they are, and how us coming together as human beings in our core of principles, how that can unite and really shift the world, bring a world of peace, and just kind of create a wave of leaders down the road.
All right. Last question.
Okay.
So let's fast forward 100 years from now. Because
Okay.
hopefully this won't happen anytime soon, but it will.
Yeah.
We're gonna die.
Okay.
We're gonna die. And you are at your eulogy.
Okay.
What's being said about Hugueth?
So at my eulogy, what would be said about Hugueth would be that she was a loving, caring, passionate, soft, and gentle, but strong and courageous role model. And she really abided by her principles, which were all at the core of being humble, showing humility, being peaceful, bringing connection, being joyful, and really showing people that they're here for a contribution to society, really showing what their gifts are and being patient with them so that they can realize that they're here for a bigger purpose.
All right. So now, lastly, you can give your last words to the viewers.
All right. So my last message to the viewers would be to be always in pursuit of your truth. And you can do that by practicing meditation, practicing silence. I find a lot of value in that also. And always being looking for personal development, videos, audios, and being in the question so that you can come into terms with your inner self. And that way you find motive and purpose and resilience to kind of keep going and pushing forth what you're here to do and accomplish.
All right. That's it. Thank you.
That's it. Thank you for having me. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, my pleasure. And